At this time, the mayor will call to order the regular city council meeting for 6 p.m. Tuesday, February 28, 2023. City Council Chambers, 201 East Nash Street, Terrell, Texas. We have present in council chambers, District 2, Grady Simpson. District 3, Mayor Ronnie Velasquez, Mayor Pro Tem. District 5, Andrea Reese. And has anybody heard from Stephanie Holmes Thomas? Is she running? She's on her way, and but we do have a quorum, so we'll continue with our meeting. At this time, we have Reverend Arvis Miller with United Church of God in Christ. Grady, would you like to say a few words or introduce the pastor?
Yes. This is Pastor Arvis Miller from United Church on High Street. He has an incredible outreach ministry. He does a lot of work with all the city staff and officials, and we're just glad to have him here to pray. I wanted to join us for dinner, but he didn't show up, but that's okay. Yes, sir.
So, Pastor, if you would please come forward, and if everybody would stand and remain standing for the pledge of our flags.
First of all, thank you all for having me this afternoon. I appreciate you so much for all you've done for the city of Terrell. We appreciate all the work you do and you allow us to do. And it is a pleasure to all of you all and a benefit and an honor to do what we do, to serve. That's all we're here to do, so thank you so much. Heavenly Father, we thank you once again for this opportunity together. We ask you, God, that you give us clarity of mind, clarity of thought, that we may, as a proverb, row in the same direction. That we have one goal ultimately in mind, is to worship you, is to serve you, is to be ambassadors of Christ. Father, I ask you to bless every leader that's represented here today. Every leader, God. We all have a responsibility to give back and to serve and to do unto others as you would have us to do unto them. And Father, God, I ask you to bless us, give us peace tonight. And let us be happy with each other and have joy. And give us vision. For your word said, God, without vision, we perish. And we thank you right now. In Jesus' name we pray. Thank God. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
So at this time, we'll have mayor and council community recognition and events. I do want to take this opportunity to welcome two of the class of '82, my classmates. Rodney Morrow's here. Rodney, would you wave your hand, please? He's a pastor and working with the school district. Good to see you here. Dina Elliott, are you back there? Good to see you as well. And thank you for all you do in our community, both of you. And then we also have a former council member, Charles Whitaker. You'd wave your hand, please. It's always good to see folks in the audience. So does anybody have any? Oh, one other thing. I want to thank our Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor Ronnie Velasquez, for being here at the dais, supporting the council and running our city council meeting. In my absence last week, I was in Austin testifying before the Senate Finance Committee, but I brought our Mayor Pro Tem a little gift from the gift shop while I was in Austin, and it's a gavel, and it's this little bitty. So thank you so much for your hard work. And you may keep that. I'll autograph it when we get done here. But
yeah. So, I almost took a similar gavel from the mayor when we were down at the Capitol for Kaufman County Day a couple of weeks ago. And I guess I have to oversee so many meetings. I think that's my fifth meeting before I can get a big real gavel, right? But thanks for your mayor. I'll add this to my collection of memorabilia at home. And I want to thank TVCC for inviting not only me, but other city leaders and staff to speak to their students at their government class. Miss Susie Smith, who happens to live in my district and is a City of Terrell not parks, but library board member, invited me to speak to her students. And I will say that for a small class, we were talking about muds, which I did not anticipate doing. We were talking about roads. We were talking about how cities are funded, and they certainly had different examples of their grievances outside of the city of Terrell, but throughout Kaufman County. But the one thing that they really wanted to know about the city of Terrell is what else is coming? What other restaurants are coming? What other shopping and businesses are coming here? And I did not do that great of a job bringing new items. Everything I was able to share with them was something that they probably had already heard on Facebook. So always a fun opportunity to look forward to.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Also, we are currently having our public hearings for downtown over at the soiree. I understand they had one at 5. They'll have another one at 6. Was it at 4? At 4 and at 6:15. And from all indication that I had when I walked over there, they had good participation, and that's what we want and need as we move forward with our downtown improvements. So good for that. And do we know when the next one will be, Mike?
We're looking for a May date to do another round of a similar meeting, yes, sir.
Okay, so if you have an opportunity and you're interested, just stay tuned to our website, City of Terrell, and we'll post that when we have that date confirmed and location confirmed. Do we have any remarks from visitors? We have none. So we'll move on. Our next item is adoption of the minutes. Discuss and consider the minutes from the regular city council meeting on February the 21st of 2023. Council members, have y'all had an opportunity to review those? Do you have my sheet? Do I have a sheet for recording the votes? Mm-mm. Maybe, oh, here it is, stuck to it, sorry. There we go. As always, it's usually the mayor that's messed up. Thank you, Don. So, have you had a chance to review the minutes? Is there a motion on item 6.1?
Motion to approve the meeting minutes from the regular city council meeting on February 21st of 2023 as presented.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
We have a motion from Mayor Ronnie Velasquez, Mayor Pro Tem District 3, a second from Andrea Reese, District 5, to approve the minutes as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with unanimous vote of those present. Our next item on the agenda is item 7. It's to discuss and consider resolution number 2063, a resolution of the City of Terrell, Council of the City of Terrell, Texas, amending resolution number 2057, calling a general election for the City of Terrell, Texas, to be administered by the Kaufman County Elections Administrator on Saturday, May the 6th of 2023, for the purpose of electing a council member for District Number 3 and a council member for District Number 5 for a 3-year term, designating the polling places and filing deadlines, ordering notices of election to be posted and published as prescribed by law in connection with such election, and providing an effective date. Ms. Steele.
Mayor and Council, Resolution number 2063 is amending number 2057 by changing the list of polling places, Exhibit A, and that is the only change. We're basically, due to TISD canceling their election, we actually decided to close a few of the polling places. The Terrell Service Center, Able Springs Fire Department, and the Elmo Fire Department, which will save the city some money on the election. And we will still have most of the polling places open. So,
Okay, well, it's only District 5 that's got
yes, it is only District 5, which will be in our next resolution
Okay.
that's having it. But the bingo hall in Terrell, Bethlehem Baptist Church, First Assembly of God Church, and the Terrell Sub Courthouse will all still be open.
Okay. Is there any questions for Don on resolution number 2063? Hearing none, is there a motion on resolution 2063? Is that to adopt? or-
Yes, sir. Yes,
Right.
sir.
Motion to accept Resolution 2063.
Is there a second? We have a motion from Andrea Reese, District 5, a second from Grady Simpson, District 2, to approve Resolution 2063 as amended. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by stating aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries with unanimous vote of those present. Our next item is 7.2. Greg, would you read that into the record,
Yes,
please?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we would bring to you tonight Resolution Number 2061, resolution of the City Council of the City of Terrell, Texas, canceling the May 6, 2023 general election for the purpose of electing council member for District Number 3 for the City of Terrell, Texas, and declaring the unopposed candidate member for District Number 3 elected to office.
Is there any discussion for our council? Hearing none, is there a motion on resolution number 2061?
I make a motion to approve resolution number 2061.
Is there a second?
Second?
We have a motion from Grady Simpson, District 2, a second from Andrea Reese, District 5, to approve resolution 2061. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by stating aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries with unanimous vote of those present. Our next item on the agenda is 8.1, discuss and consider zoning board of adjustment appointments. This is, again, our city secretary, Don Stahl.
Mayor and council, the roster for the zoning board of adjustments is in your packet. Matthew Hancock he wishes to be reappointed, and Ashley Carmona Fivecoat, her term ended in February of '23. She does not wish to be reappointed. And Carolyn Fairley, who moved away, also her place needs to be filled. There is a new application in the packet for Dina Boyd, and this falls under the oversight of Andrea Reese.
All right, Councilwoman Reese, what is your pleasure?
Well, I checked with both of the other gentlemen we had applications from, and Mr. Eubanks and Mr. Hamilton both were unable to serve and wanted to withdraw their applications at this time. So I would like to accept the reappointment of Mr. Hancock, and I would like for us to accept the application of Dina Boyd.
Is that a motion, madam?
Would you like to make a motion?
That is a
That-
motion.
That is your motion?
Yes.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Andrea Reese, District 5, a second from May Ronnie Velazquez, Mayor Pro Tem District 3, to appoint Dina Boyd to our Zoning Board of Adjustments and to reappoint Matthew Hancock to the Zoning Board of Adjustments. Is there any further discussion?
I would just like to point out that Dina came tonight for her appointment. So for those of you that don't know her, she's the other redhead in the room.
Yeah, I know Dina. Like I said, she's a former a former classmate. So I think she'll do well. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by stating aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries with unanimous vote of those present. Our next item on the agenda is 9.1. Dina, welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustments. 9.1 is discuss and affordable housing update. Claire, sir?
Mayor and council, she was not able to make this presentation this evening. We will have it on March 7th, so that will be back on the agenda next time.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is 9.2, a discuss item as well, McClendon Chisholm extraterritorial jurisdiction boundary agreement with John Goodwin.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. To kind of give you a little history on this, and some of it you're familiar with, some of it very familiar with perhaps, but It's been, well over 3 years since a private property owner within the McLennan Chisholm ETJ and also the city of McLennan Chisholm.
I said Goodwin, didn't I? I meant Godwin.
You did.
Godwin, I'm sorry.
I've heard it before.
Godwin, it's Godwin. All right, go ahead.
I forgot what I was talking about now. No. And so, you know, we looked into that. The response from Terrell was initially that, you know, that we would certainly be interested in selling water if it's practical, but we would basically trade water for land. Because of the interest of the city in extending its ETJ all the way, and ultimately the city limits all the way to the county line, which is also the line between the northern boundary for Terrell ISD. And so we conducted a feasibility study, various studies to see if it's practical. It's about an 8 or 9 mile line to where we were talking about going. That's a challenge because not only the cost and the acquisition of enough, enough easements to build a water line, but to make the water line flow because of the hydrology of it. If you don't have enough users, the water just sits there and grows stagnant. So that was an issue too. Along the process, we did pick up 2 development partners. Partners in the sense that they needed water and we have water to sell. And so we started working with them to share those costs, which made it a lot more feasible. And then more recently, RCH, which supplies a number of customers inside of McLennan Chisholm. There are actually 3 different suppliers that serve McLennan Chisholm. McLennan Chisholm doesn't serve water themselves at all yet. RCH decided to basically give up and allow RCH to take them over. They're actually in the process of doing that now. That could change. We think that's going to happen. And so with all of those kinds of things moving forward, which would ultimately have us be a water wholesaler to McLennan Chisholm, and McLennan Chisholm become a retailer. RCH was getting water from Rockwall for many, many years. Rockwall no longer had the ability to serve them. One of the reasons we think that RCH decided to give up because it was very expensive for them to go out and procure water on their own. So we move forward down the road. We develop a draft agreement, a memorandum of understanding that both cities entered into. And the bottom line of that was, just like I said, we would provide them water for their city. They would provide water to these development partners that we had, and in turn, they would allow us to expand our ETJ and future city limits up to the boundary. That agreement was approved by both city councils. It was executed by both cities, and so we moved forward under that basis. We've spent a good bit of time and money on this. This project actually started before I came to work here, and I've been here for over 3 years now, which is kind of amazing. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I enjoy it almost all the time, which is pretty good for any job. And so now we come to the really important part, and that's the boundaries. And the boundaries, boundary agreements are important to any time because especially in times of growth, and you're having times of growth all through this county, and Rockwall County's been growing for a long time, and Dallas County not too far away. As cities start bumping up against each other, it becomes a real problem. And so even though the cities are not very close, it's good to have those boundaries set now. The agreement that we've got here is an agreement basically that I've used when I settled agreement with McKinney and with Allen and with Lucas when I was working in Collin County many years ago for the very same reasons. In that case, we waited until there were conflicts and problems. So it's really good to do this ahead of time, to get it done now while they need water and while we need stability. It's good for property owners not to just know where they are right now, but to what city they're going to be in long term. It allows cities to invest time and capital and investments and plan, control growth now because they know where their city limits is going to be. It might be 5 years, it might be 19 years before your city's going to be out there, but you know where your city's going to begin and end, and McLennan Chisholm knows the same thing. This evening, McLennan Chisholm is scheduled to discuss this item, to have a presentation discussion just like we're doing here. The plan is that both cities will consider the agreement before you 2 weeks from tonight on March the 14th. Both cities would approve that agreement and execute that. And it does not automatically, one thing I want to make clear is it does not automatically move the ETJ. It certainly doesn't move any boundaries at all. It just provides that this line, basically the county line, if you'd go put that map back again, just so I can talk about that a little bit. This is going to be the future boundary. And so you see the line dividing the tan and the pink. Those are areas, the tan areas are areas that Terrell will acquire that are not in Terrell's ETJ now. ETJ is based on state law, your population, where your city limits is, so forth and so on. So those areas don't just come into Terrell immediately. but they are there so that they will become part of Terrell's ETJ in the future. And so you can have that with certainty. So you can work with those property owners, you can work with those developers. And again, the people who own those properties know, well, we're not in Terrell yet, we know we will be someday. They don't have to wonder or worry or delay investment in those areas, wondering which city they're going to be in. So that's the value to this, and hopefully that made some sense. If you have any questions, any discussion we need to have as we move forward on that.
Yeah, let me just throw in here, so reading the map here, the pink areas are gonna be areas where we're basically saying, McClendon, Chisholm, we're agreeing that even if our city limit starts to get close to those pink areas, we will not put them in our ETJ, okay? And likewise, McClendon Chisholm is saying, hey, even though our city limits, which is that blue line there, even though part of the McClendon Chisholm city limits already is large enough to include 100% of the tan area in its ETJ, they're saying, hey, they're gonna go backwards and they're gonna back up for us. So the tan area, not in our city ETJ right now. It's all currently in the McClendon Chisholm ETJ. So they're gonna go backwards on their ETJ and back up, allowing us to in the future move in. And then we're guaranteeing that no matter where our lines end up being, our lines will not interfere with their ETJ in the pink areas, and that we won't in the future annex the pink areas, okay? So that's kind of how to read the map. So that's the deal that John has worked through the process for us, and I think it's gotten us to a good point. There are compromises on the map because we're dealing with a city that's, needs to vote on it as well, but we think this is a good compromise map between the two cities.
One thing I'd just add to that too is that the title there is appropriate. It's a permanent boundary agreement, so it's not just, this is what it is today until another council changes it. Statutorily, when cities enter into these kinds of agreements, unless they both agree to change it later, this is the boundary, so you do have that certainty, and that's a really important thing too for development and for the cities.
And it's a lot to do with planning and being ahead of the game and making sure that everybody knows where we're gonna be growing to and our limits, right?
Right.
All right. So does anybody have any questions or comments for Godwin as we move forward with this?
Oh, come on. Ask me something.
I would say, hey, if you haven't already, please silence your phones.
Just did. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
Anyone else? Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 9.3, which is discuss drainage study and design services for the Terrell Downtown Square and Central Park. This is our city engineer, Chris Snap.
Mayor, City Council, City Manager. I bring to you tonight a discussion item of something that we've talked about for long and hard across the city, and that is the drainage across the city. So we're going to bring tonight a consideration for discussion on engineering design services for the downtown square and the park area. Don, if you would, go to page 40. There you go. What you have before you, and I'll just talk briefly, and then I'll allow Mike Burns to come up and speak more into details of what services he's going to be providing and go from there. But you can see is the area that we're talking about is all the blue area of the drainage that we have to consider all the way from the university all the way over to 34. As many of you know, that's a major issue within our city. So this design service is going to talk about that and coming up with a remedy all the way across to handle the new downtown area and the town square park area. So with that, I'll turn it over here to Mike and let him speak for a little bit.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Mike?
Mayor, Council, Mike Burns for record from KSA Engineers.
You have before you a task order for discussion from KSA Engineers to provide professional services for a drainage study of the area that Chris was talking about. And when we've been engaged by the city to do some really conceptual planning for the downtown square and the Central Park development area, through that whole planning process, we discovered that there was, and if you know, there's drainage challenges in that area of town, but it's flat. The bar ditches in the streets are very shallow. It just has a lot of challenges with drainage. And the city manager has recognized that and has budgeted some money for a study. This study that we're providing for the city will look at that whole watershed area and come back with some recommendations for improvements in this study. Embedded in this agreement is also some important other services that we're providing along with that study. We're going to do a very comprehensive topographic survey of the whole downtown park area, downtown square and park area. Would help us in our drainage, but it also will help in knowing where everything is and what buildings are and where they are. It's just going to give us a really defined working drawing to work off of. We're also going to do surface utility engineering, which means we're going to go out and locate all the franchise utilities in this area and try to tie those down by survey so that we have that information available for future use. And we are also going to be doing geotechnical and doing some geotechnical to determine what the future street structures are going to need to be, but also just what the existing soils conditions are in that future development area, which also will be used in the years to come. So embedded in this drainage study is also all these other services we're going to provide within this this task agreement that is before you for discussion. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So Mike, before we take questions, I just want to emphasize something on that Exhibit A2, which was the page 40 that we were on a second ago. So think of it this way. If Mr. Burns and his engineering team and Chris Knapp can come up with the right engineering solution for the things that are pink on this map, the Rochester Street open drainage facility, the culverts under 34 and underneath the Union Pacific Railroad line, the Garner Street culvert channel, if we have the right solutions at those key places, then it enables us, and it'll take a while, but it will enable us to take the zone shown in green here and have the zone shown in green be an area where we can methodically do proper stormwater in those roads, okay? And until we get to the point where those items that are highlighted in pink are done correctly, we really can't go and start putting widespread stormwater in that zone. So this is a really helpful study for us, and it also starts the design services of actually designing those things. And I would ask council to think of it like this. This is a pay-as-you-go item where we're spending this money out of our stormwater fund. You will see in your FY24 budget the next leg of this, right? So as they figure out and come forward and say, hey, let's do this along Rochester, hey, let's do this under 34, let's do this at Gardner, whatever they might come up with, not only are we evaluating that, picking the right winner of a project, but also built into this is the beginning work to actually do the engineering design so we can have the blueprints and we can actually come forward and fund that project. And build that project. So we're not studying exclusively here. We're going to figure out the right thing to do and then get it built. So you should definitely anticipate another expense associated with this project and the engineering of this project in the FY24 budget. So that's a lot of budget implications. I just want to make sure all that was very clear.
Yep. So my comment to the council would be that for many years, District 2 and 3 have been underserved when it comes to the drainage issues that we have. So when we get an opportunity to begin, this is just the first step, and we always have to start somewhere, but this is the beginning of improving District 2 and 3 drainage throughout. In other words, there'll be some benefit to what we move forward with for the entire districts. And I don't know how you couldn't or wouldn't want to support moving forward with the beginning for culverts under the 34 and UP Spur or Gardner Street, the culvert in the channel, and then also the Rochester Street that we're beginning to look at. Now, I know that for some people within our community, it's like, hey, you've never looked at us before. You haven't cared. Now that you're doing a downtown project, now all of a sudden you're interested. Well, that may be what it looks like, but you got to look at where we are and where we're going. And this is the beginning. We had to start somewhere, and if this was the catalyst that started it, then that's so be it for that. But we need to really look at, and fund, and try to find a solution to some of the drainage issues that we've got in District 2 and 3. Y'all know that I don't like talking north and south, so we're not going to do that. But for District 2 and 3, they deserve the same discussions that we had in 4 and 5 over those years. So does anybody have any comments or questions as we move forward?
Yes, Mayor. The budget for the study, is that just a proposed budget, or is that a not-to-exceed number?
This is a not to exceed.
Okay, thank you.
So my question, my first question is regarding the, how much downstream will the effects of the study and any projects as a result of this proposed study, how much will it improve downstream drainage apart from the area that's enclosed within the green section?
That is beyond what's on the drawing? Well, that discharges into, and I can't remember, is that, what's his name of it? What is it?
Kings Creek.
Kings Creek. And Kings Creek basically flows from here all the way past the airport, across 20, and there's not much development. I don't know of what the FEMA flood zone is in that, but what we will be doing is studying the impact to that. We're not, in this study, we're not studying downstream of that. We're going to the end of what's shown on that drawing, and then seeing what the impact will be with all the other drainage that is to the north of that does come down Kings Creek. But we will not be going further downstream in this study to see what is in this open ground area all the way down past the airport to I-20 on Kings Creek. Does that answer your question?
So Mike, what I'm hearing is that aside from the boundary area, which is in green, it has the potential to improve the drainage that flows down towards Kings Creek or along the Kings Creek drainage area.
Yes.
The only effect from this drainage study and the improvements aside from what's in the green area. You know, I certainly hear what the mayor recommendation and feedback regarding the study. Where I always have heartburn is, you know, is there an opportunity to expand this study to include areas further south? And I'll get with staff and talk about some of the upcoming projects that we have regarding drainage needs, sewer needs, moving down south. But I do have heartburn about where the funding is coming from, specifically in the utility account, because I think that those funds could be used for other projects in the community. So if there's a way that we can figure out where those funds can be pulled from aside from the utility account, maybe even share, that would give me less heartburn around where the funding's coming from. And like I said, I'd certainly open to opening up the drainage study further south to address other areas of need that we may not be able to get to with some of the existing plans we have for other areas, for other concerns.
Anyone else?
Just wanted to make sure, because just kind of looking at how at least my understanding of how drainage like this works, is so when you start someplace, it's better to start someplace with drainage and then study how those flows go. And then that helps you do better drainage further downstream. Instead of trying to do it all at once. Because sometimes it gets a little unpredictable with how the land and the drainage is actually going to react, right?
Correct. As the development happens, what's already been developed has increased the runoff. And as we do more in development in this watershed, it will increase runoff. The drainage study will look at opportunities to use detention ponds, anything that we can do to improve the overall drainage within this study area so that we're not increasing the outflow of fall into Kings Creek. Or if we have to, that's what we'll find out. And then if we do, what's the impact downstream, looking at what's happening down there? But it's not within our scope as of right now to look past what's shown here on this drawing.
And I think that's a budgetary issue. You know, we just don't have the funding to do it all. But we need to start somewhere, right?
This is for my stormwater budget. Is that right, Mr. Sims?
Yes, this was in the FY23 approved stormwater budget for $500,000. We have a total of $1.7 million in revenue in that fund in FY23, and we had brought forward some spending on that, and that's in the FY23 budget. I don't have that with me, but I'll get that sent out to council, sort of an answer to that question about, hey, what's that overall stormwater budget look like in FY23? But we did plan for it, and it was budgeted in this fiscal year in this dollar amount.
Thank you.
So no new dollars are being spent on this.
Right, and
Yeah.
I'll just send that out to you. Yeah, I mean, that's just in your budget ordinance, but I can send that out to everybody so you can take a look at it. And if you want to mull over a discussion on it, you'll just be armed with that information for next time. Yeah.
All right, so, anyone else? So this is the discuss study. When will this come back to us? And this is this going to be a not to exceed number, right, of 492.5? Okay. It'll be back next week. So does anybody have any comments or questions? I would ask that if you're not clear on something, please reach out to Chris or Mike or either Mike or Mike. Right.
Yeah.
And get those clarified before we see it next week.
Yes, sir, and I'll send out the budget information early tomorrow.
Okay, and for the record, we do now have Stephanie Holmes Thomas, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, District 4 with us, so good to see you, Ms. Thomas. Next item on the agenda is 9.4, discuss resolution number 2060, resolution authorizing continued participation with the Atmos City Steering Committee and authorizing the payment of 5 cents per capita to the Atmos City Steering Committee to fund regulatory and related activities related to Atmos Energy Corporation. City Secretary Don Stahl.
The Atmos City Steering Committee, ACSC, is composed of 184 municipalities in the service area of Atmos Energy Corporation, Mid-Tex Division. Atmos is a monopoly provider of natural gas. Because Atmos has no competitors, regulation of the rates that it charges its customers is the only way that cities can ensure that natural gas rates are fair. ACSC is the largest coalition of cities served by Atmos Mid-Tex. ACSC is actively involved in rate cases, appeals, rulemakings, and legislative efforts impacting the rates charged by Atmos within the city. The population-based assessment was adopted by ACSC of 5 cents per capita. This is the same amount that was adopted for 2019 through 2022. So this resolution authorizes the continuation of the city's membership in ACSC and the payment of the city's assessment of $984.65. And this will be on next week's agenda for action.
Okay. This is a discussion item. Does anybody have any questions for Don? Okay, thank you, Don. Next item on the agenda is business items. This is 10.1. Discuss and consider change order number 1 for the North Blanche Sewer Project. This is City Engineer Chris Snap.
City Council, City Mayor, City Manager. This come to you, this is a happy note. This is, I'm giving you back some money. So I expect a quick vote on this one.
Be unanimous.
But basically, in a nutshell, let me brief for what we discussed last week. This was a CDBG grant for water and sewer that was done on Blanche Street. And part of that grant requirement is the XIT contractor did not spend all the money that we allotted for him to do. So this is actually, we have to bring this back to get approval to give you back credit. So that's what I bring back to you. The credit was $61,099.12. So that is what I bring back to the council for approval.
So we're just gonna approve receiving $61,099.12
That's
in a change order. Got it?
Does the credit then go back to Texas Department of Agriculture, or does it stay with the city? And if so, can you remind me of what the limitations are on how those funds can use and what specific account those funds would go back into?
Those funds would come back to the city. Now, as far as the details, I want to ask for some guidance. Ooh,
Part of it. We'll all hide our phones. Part of what I would say here is that this project was being funded through, I believe, our UCR fund. So the UCR fund was being used to both pay the expense and to receive the money in from the grant agency. And so in this particular instance, with a little bit of money coming back, that's going to just be good for the bottom line of your UCR fund.
And there is nothing else we can use this money for based on your expertise. Nothing else.
So the problem with spending it through the Texas Department of Agriculture is that we would have to be building stuff that was specifically identified in the grant. Because we didn't have something specifically identified in the grant that was eligible, we weren't able to get anything else grant funded. So I would have liked to, but you know, that's not a way that we were able to do it on this particular project.
The next time, can we put more options in the grant when we write it? Just looking forward next time.
I always love trying, so that's a good goal, and we'll give that a shot.
So I'm still not clear on, so the funds just stay in the account and nothing can be done with the funds, or can they be
No,
transferred?
what I'm saying is that when we spend a little bit less on a project, that's good for the bottom line of the fund. And so the next time we allocate money or budget money out of that fund, we'll have a little bit more money in the bottom line of the fund. So we often show you our fund balance in the capital improvement fund, or we show you our fund balance in the UCR fund. And so as we program funds for our next round of expenditures, we'll be able to look at that and say, hey, there's a little bit more money there, and now we'll ask council to make an allocation of those funds. Tonight's just not the time where we're allocating the funds. Tonight's just saying, hey, step one is it's going to be a multi-month process to have all of this get settled out through our grant agency, so it will take a while before all this percolates down to being actually in your fund. So we'll make a decision about that in the future, and if we have a cost overrun on a project, or we have a new project, or we have something else we want to do with the money, we'll bring that forward at that time.
Thank you for the clarification.
I'm excited not to bring to you, I need $61,000.99. That's the positive side of it.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Snap. Is there a motion on change order number 1?
Make a motion to approve change order number 1 for North Blanche Sewer Project.
Wonderful. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Stephanie Holmes Thomas, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem District 4, and a second from Grady Simpson, District 2, to approve the change order number 1 for a credit in the amount of $61,099.12 for the North Blanche Sewer Project. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with unanimous vote of those present. Our next item on the agenda is 10.3. Discuss and consider design services of sidewalk infrastructure improvements for Westmore Avenue. And-
We skipped one.
Oh, did we? Oh, you're right. I got it circled. You're correct. Sorry, Steve. Mr. Rogers, my apologies. To the senior director, my apologies. Discuss and consider lease agreement for a combination cleaning unit. Mr. Rogers. Hey, I'm trying to move things along here.
Well, I'm spending money, so I expect there to be less discussion on that than there was for a credit. So, I'm bringing this, Mr. McKeska, I'm doing this on his behalf. He's on a well-deserved vacation right now, and we discussed this last week. And if you would go to page 65, please. And again, I'll recap what he's put together. Dane's here. Come on up, Dane. He's with Chemlock. And so you'll remember, Mike went over this. This is a three-headed monster here. You have Chemlock, which is the folks that we deal with on a day-to-day basis with our equipment. This is a combination unit that does vacuuming as well as jetting sewers. And Chemlock's got a place in Arlington. We've been doing business with them for many years. And they have this proposal. They have a truck. Santex is providing the truck. Republic First National's the financing mechanism for this. And on this page here, it pretty well summarizes for you what we're doing here. 5-year lease. And then there's the mile after mile program with Chemlock where they take care of repairs, maintenance in a rental unit if our equipment is down, which is extremely important with this. And as we discussed, these pieces of equipment like this are getting harder and harder to come by. We appreciate the heads up from Kenlock on this. If you'll go to page 85, please, if you don't mind, quickly. And again, this goes back, they are giving us a credit on our trade-in equipment there, $87,550. You can see in the middle of that table down there, and this kind of explains the program there. This is going to be funded out of the utility fund for now. We need this so bad that we're ready to fund it straight out of the utility fund for the time being. We can work that into the equipment replacement fund, I hope it's sometime in the near future. And so Dane's here. He's ready to answer any questions. He knows more about it than I do, but happy to take any questions.
Dane, did you present last Tuesday?
Yes, sir, I did speak.
Okay, does anybody have any new questions for Dane?
Dane, did I hear you correctly last meeting that the truck will be in Terrell tomorrow?
The truck is actually in Terrell today. It's ready to go. It'll be as soon as the council votes yes, and we've already got the conditional PO. Once that's a finalized PO, which I'm, assuming will happen, we'll start the cleanup and preparation of it to be delivered. My expectation is that the unit itself, it's ready. It can come up today if there was an emergency, if it was needed. It'll be ready next week after being cleaned up and serviced.
Oh, I'm always in favor of upgrading our equipment or updating the equipment as well, but is there any training involved in this new machine?
There's full training involved, and
Okay.
there's lifetime training thereafter.
Good, I'm good. Council?
Chemlock covered that?
My
Chemlock covered the
apologies.
training. Chemlock covered the training.
That is correct.
All right,
There's, Mayor, there's
yes.
attached in here the agreements with Republic First National, and then there's an agreement with Chemlock. Both of those will need to be signed, so if you want to authorize city manager to execute those documents, I'd appreciate you doing that along with this motion, if we could, please.
And I've reviewed those documents, Mr. Mayor, and find them to be in order.
I just have a question. Is it standard to do the 5-year lease versus a longer period of time? When I look at this truck and however long this apparatus lasts, is that pretty standard, 5 years? Are we happy with that? Will we save money?
I think so. I would suspect in 5 years, we will have gotten our money's worth out of it and what we use it for, because we have a lot of stop sewers in places we need to vacuum. So I think we will get our money's worth out of it and probably turn it in at the end of that period and start over again with some other unit, we hope by then. We hope Dane's still there and he comes back in 5 years to do that again.
So we're going to need authorization for the city manager to sign an agreement with two separate entities, right?
Yeah, Mayor, I'm going to
Make
ask
sure that we
Greg
have
this
those correct.
question and see if we can get this streamlined for you.
Okay.
Greg, I think we'd be
believe
free to
it's-
have them authorize my signature on the agreements, plural, as provided in item 10.2.
Yes, that's
What-
correct. There are two agreements with Republic First National and one with Kimlock.
Kinlock and First, Republic First National.
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right, any more questions?
So Mayor, we're authorizing the city manager's signature.
To enter into an agreement with Kinlock and also enter an agreement with Republic First National. Okay? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Is there a motion on 10.2?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize the city manager to enter into agreement with Kimlock as well as with Republic First.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Grady Simpson, District 2, a second from Andrea Reese, District 5, to authorize our city manager to sign an agreement with both Kinlock and Republic First National. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with unanimous vote of those present. Our next item on the agenda is 10.3. Greg, would you read that, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Item 10.3 is discuss and consider design services of sidewalk infrastructure improvements for Westmore Avenue and South Virginia Street.
Chris Snap.
Council, city manager, city mayor, I bring to you on the second reading here of the project that was TDC money that was funded in 2021. And this is considering the sidewalk infrastructure improvements along Moore. Dawn, if you would go to page 50, well, it's not 56 on this one. Back up. Whoa. Slow down.
The maps are 98 and 99.
Yeah, there you go. I've got there you go. As we discussed last week, this project, and I'll let Mike Burns from KSA bring some more details on this, any other further questions, but this project will involve in adding sidewalks from approximately Brookshire's Drive to Bradshaw, both on the north and the south side of the Moore Avenue. And the second part of this project would be adding sidewalk, if you go one more slide, Dawn, would be along Virginia. And as I said, this was funded through DDC, and now this is for the design services for KSA. Let Mike come up, and if you have any questions, this is for discuss and consider.
Does anybody have any questions for Mike or Chris on these two projects? I think I like the Bradshaw to Brookshire's. I can think of a few instances, but the first instance would be on Friday nights when we have football games, and we've now got the light, well-needed light there at Bradshaw. And so it gives those that are walking an opportunity to do so safely. And eventually, our goal, our hope is that all of our community is connected by sidewalks and everybody can travel and get to and from areas safely. So I'm in favor of moving forward with this. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
No, I have a question, sir. When you looked at the South Virginia section, what were the issues that pressed you to put that in that specific area? Even when I look, it's on the east side versus the west side, what was the determination? Is it square footage that you had to use up? Or
No, basically, we were, Councilwoman, we were actually trying to get south of the complete street improvements that are being designed by Kimley Horn as far as that. So we wanted to utilize the money on Virginia Street, and we wanted to complement the work that's going to be going on with the complete street. So that's how we got to the south and just picked a place that was the most usable place to spend the money. Because it's available money that's been granted to the city, and we've got to use it on Virginia Street. But we had to get out of the area that's already being, gonna be improved by the Complete Street project. So we went south of that area and just picked an area that would probably pick up a lot more pedestrian use.
I was thinking of connectability too. If we're trying to get that street sidewalk.
It's all gonna tie, once it's all done, it's gonna all tie. This is just one small segment of everything that's gonna get done in that area over the next few years.
I thought it would have started right at the track.
It's kinda weird,
Skip
yeah,
a block and
yeah.
then there we are.
It-
That didn't make sense, but
it's kinda
it's because of what you're doing everywhere else to
It's
connect
kinda
that
just-
together.
Yes, ma'am, yeah.
Motion to the madness.
So my question is around the proposed landscaping. What type of proposed landscaping do we have in the yellow areas?
Well,
And I
I have
ask
to admit that
because-
that is not correct, because we're not gonna be able to do any landscaping with this funding. It's TxDOT, it's on TxDOT, roads, and to do landscaping with TxDOT, we have to do it according to their, just what they want, how they want it. It's very minimal. And so through the process, right towards the end, we just took the landscaping out, and actually extended the length and tried to do more money with concrete and sidewalks. So we're not really doing improvements. Now, not to say we can't do a little pocket area that would enhance it. We'd happy to do that, but as far as landscaping for the length
Yeah,
of the road
and
as
let
shown on
me-
this drawing,
Let me defend
Yeah.
Mike for being vague in his answer. I would say that this is the start of an engineering process, okay? And at the start of the engineering process, what's going to happen is that Mike Burns is going to go to TxDOT and say, may we do this, may we do that? Could we design it like this? Could we design it like that? I'm going to use the Park and Downtown Improvement Corporation Board to kind of look over the project because it's in their geographic area of control. And so we're going to see as we go through the process, Mike come back to the Paddock Board and say, hey, good news, they decided they would let us do it this way and design it this way. Bad news, they didn't let us do this, they didn't let us do that. And our goal here is to fully engineer a project where they'll look at it and they'll say, okay, great, you don't have to pay a local match. We're just going to fund this entirely with transportation development credits. And so that's kind of the end goal that we have here. And it's just going to take us a little while to work through all those details. So Mike's not trying to be vague because he's trying to be evasive. He's trying to be vague because he knows that TxDOT is going to say no to some stuff, but we're not quite sure what they might say no to yet, so.
Well, let me clarify. The reason for my question is that we're putting in sidewalk along an area, or the proposal is to put in a sidewalk in an area where, yes, we anticipate pedestrians will use along the football field park area. And at the same time, I have a concern of what barrier will we have in the area, or how much it even crosses where vehicles tend to park when there's football games or we have a jubilee, because we all along this, what do you call it, the shoulder of that area on 9th Street through like the Brookshires parking lot, you have vehicles that will park all along the side. So what are we doing to protect and prevent vehicles from parking there with this plan, so we don't put sidewalks in and then they have weight all over them, or they're getting dirty?
Yeah, and I would just say that's exactly the right question, and I think that if we get them under contract to do the engineering, then it'll be their job to come back and say, hey, we found these XYZ solutions to these XYZ problems out in the real world. You're 100% right about identifying them, but I want to get them under contract to do the work so that they can actually design it, because part of the answer is going to be measurements in the field about slopes, drainage, all of the real world considerations out there. So it's a little hard to say, here's exactly the explanation. So I'm giving you a little cover there, Mike, but you want to fill in any other thoughts on that?
Well, to address your point, we did have discussion about the landscape back several, I've not been here forever, but several months ago when we started, for a while, and we talked about landscaping. When you look at Moore Avenue, you cannot just say every linear foot, there's gonna be X, Y, Z. And it's gonna repeat every X, Y, Z feet. Because when you go along that area, some sides of the roads, there's a lot of concrete in between distances. So, we kind of backed up and then we have some guidelines that we gotta stay in our lane, so to speak. But in some areas, when you get closer to the football field, there might be some areas that we address more specifically that we can look at landscaping, but as to make it cookie cutter that it's gonna be the same landscape repeated every 50 feet, you're gonna run into some areas that it's not viable to spend those dollars. It's not even warranted to have a landscape in that area.
Yeah, and my, I wasn't jumping of joy for landscaping necessarily. It's nice to have it, but more so as a hopeful protective barrier for those vehicles trying to park on your new sidewalk is really my concern. But always happy to accept, free money, for projects, and, that's all I'll say. Thank you both.
Are there any requirements that we collaborate with TxDOT to do something like this, or we can just do it?
No, we have to work very closely with TxDOT because we're in there right away. They'll have to be designed to TxDOT standards, meet ADA requirements, and just kind of fit that in. Of course, as Mike said, there's places all through there on Moore Street that has huge driveways, and it's gonna be a challenge to just come up with a good plan all the way through there. But I think overall, it's gonna end up being, as we want, is pedestrian safety. That's what this is pedestrian safety. And, we have to kind of provide that, meet TxDOT standard requirements, and then try to gain anything we can as far as improvements, for barriers or whatever helps the city in their use of that area.
I've said this in the past. I think we should be putting money into sidewalks. We ought to be using our taxpayers' dollars. They're the ones using the sidewalks. I love grants. I love free money. I love credits. But if we believe it, I think we still ought to be putting some money aside in our budget to do some of this extra stuff. I don't care if it's landscaping. I don't care if it's adding 50 feet or going an extra block on Virginia. We have to we have to buy in as well. And I think when we spend our money, people know we bought into sidewalks. That's just my comment on that.
Mayor, Mayor and Council, I'd just like to say this, with any project, there's always some unforeseen challenges, that can come up. And we can probably sit back and try to contemplate what challenges come up here, but at the end of the day, the way I look at it, a city that doesn't have sidewalks doesn't love its children. A city that doesn't have sidewalks doesn't want its city connected. So when I look at this project, it's a start to that. I see more than just sidewalks. I see a city that's gonna have children and citizens that's gonna be safer, and I see a city that's gonna be more connected. It's a start where we are. It's not perfect, but we can work out all the details later as we go.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Anyone else? So, this is a discuss and consider. This is for services. I guess we're gonna need to authorize our city manager to enter into an agreement with KSA. Is there a amount? The 178,000? Okay.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
Authorize the city manager.
Yep. Y'all have that, so it's enter agreement with KSA not to exceed $170,000 with KSA. All right. Is there a motion on item 10.3?
Motion to authorize the city manager to enter into agreement with KSA for the sidewalk infrastructure improvements for Westmore Avenue and South Virginia Street in an amount not to exceed $178,000.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Mayor Ronnie Velazquez, Mayor Pro Tem District 3, a second from Andrea Reese, District 5, to authorize our city manager to enter an agreement with KSA in an amount not to exceed $170,000. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, unanimous vote of those present. Our next item on the agenda is 10.4.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we bring to you tonight, resolution number 2058, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Terrell, Texas, approving and authorizing the submission of a grant application to the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response SAFER Grant Program for the Terrell Fire Department and establishing an effective date.
All right. Chief?
Mayor and council, I come before you tonight on second reading for approval, hopefully, for this resolution, for those that we can enter into and apply for the FEMA SAFER grant, which would allow us, if approved through the grant processing, to hire 10 additional firefighters.
Okay, thank you, Chief. So this is a second reading. Y'all
Actually, it
reviewed
was
this?
discussed at our last meeting.
Okay, it's the first reading, but it's the
It's just a
second time you've
resolution,
seen it.
actually.
Second time you've seen it. So are there any new questions for the chief? None? All right, Chief. Thank you. Is there a motion on Resolution 2058?
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve resolution number 2058.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Grady Simpson, District 2, a second from Andrea Reese, District 5, to approve Resolution 2058. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by stating aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries, unanimous vote of those present. Our next item on the agenda is 10.5. Greg?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we bring to you tonight for consideration and resolution number 2062, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Terrell, Texas, setting a date, time, and location for 2 public hearings on proposed annexations of certain properties by the City of Terrell, Texas, authorizing and directing the city secretary to publish notice of such public hearings, authorizing a description of the properties to be annexed, and directing notice of the proposed annexations to the affected property owners.
All right. Mr. Sims?
So, Mayor and Council, this is the result of quite a bit of work over quite a number of years. We started this process back in 2019, whenever we were listening to the state law changes that were going on down in Austin at the time. At the time, we knew that we wanted to make sure that we properly grandfathered some of those annexations for future consideration of the council. And we did that through resolutions number 927 and 928. And so we've got a group now of 15 different annexations, 3 of which are a group of voluntary annexations. And we're going to move forward on those. And the first step in that, obviously, is to do the public hearings associated with that. So it's important to say what we're doing and what we're not doing. So Resolution 2062 directs city staff to go through the process of identifying impacted landowners, identifying the service providers of different utilities and franchise utilities that are in those areas, and to publish in the Terrell Tribune notice of the public hearings, and then to just set up and staff those public hearings. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, and we don't want to embark on that work unless we actually pass the resolution and direct us to move forward. If council passes it, all that means is that on March the 20th, you will have 2 public hearings, one at noon and one at 6 p.m. at the Jamie Foxx Performing Arts Center. And at those hearings, we'll hear whatever landowners have to say about these proposed annexations. There's a map attached to this that I'm going to ask Dawn to flip over to. And it's a little bit hard to read, but I'm just going to give you the basics of it. And I'm going to tell you that tomorrow morning, all of this will open up on a website that we have where you can go to our cityofterrell.org, click on that, and you'll see a link to not only this map, but also lots of information about each individual different annexation. So the first set to talk about are noted in yellow. Everything in yellow on this map is a agricultural annexation agreement that was signed in a previous year. Some of these date to 2016, some to 2017, some to 2019, and they're all areas where when the city was pursuing an annexation in the past, the landowner said, well, I have a Kaufman County approved agricultural exemption on the land, and I would like to delay my annexation for a period of time. So those have, aged out, so to speak. They've gotten to be old enough where they transition from being an agricultural agreement to stay out of the city limits. They transition automatically under the document signed at the time to be an agricultural voluntary annexation. So that's the 1,000 acres in yellow on this map. Then there are several areas that surround the city which we consider to be the areas most likely to see large-scale development, and so the effort was to try to identify those areas and make sure that we pursued annexation on them. Some of the areas do overlap with the areas that the city pursued and won a lawsuit on back in the 2019 period, but we didn't draw those lines to be exactly the same thing because, of course, additional development has happened since then, and we want to make sure that our current annexation efforts line up with current development pressures. So there are 6,000 and roughly 200 acres there in purple for annexation through our grandfathering. I won't go through an exhaustive list of those right now, but they are available for review. And again, it's areas that you would duly recognize. It's the Witt Ranch area across from the high school. It's a corridor along State Highway 34, a corridor along State Highway 205, some annexations out on East US 80, annexations that are just to the south side of Interstate 20, basically land areas that are a mile or less than a mile from the Interstate 20 corridor. So there's a series of them, and they're all being pursued as individual separate annexations because we felt like it was most fair to consider individual groups at a time. So this won't be a big slate of council just votes on one thing. What we'll actually do during the public hearings is have individual hearings on each individual group numbered A through P. And so you got a busy day on March 20th because you'll have open a public hearing on A, listen to public comments about it, close a public hearing, and you'll repeat that process all the way from A through P, and you'll get down to P. You'll open a public hearing on annexation area P, see if there's anybody with public comments on that one, record those public comments, and then close the public hearing. Unlike some of the public hearings we do, the vote is not the same day, and so that's an important part of the state law process. The votes for these would occur later on the April 11th City Council agenda if the council should so choose to proceed with them after listening to public comments on them. In general, I wanted to read a little bit of comments into the record so that it's clear what we're doing here. And I'm basically going to go through parts of what's in the press release associated with this because I felt like it's important to kind of get it out there. Kaufman County was recently named the fastest growing county in the nation. In order to address the need for roads, police, and public services to keep up with this record growth, the City of Terrell is pursuing annexation proceedings for multiple areas outside the city limits. These annexations represent a proactive effort to match new land uses to available public services, and annexation is the process that the city uses, as you know, to expand the city limits. Again, landowners are being invited to attend one of two public hearings scheduled March 20th, 2023 at noon and at 6 p.m., and those are both at the Jamie Foxx Performing Arts Center. And again, it's about 1,092 acres of voluntary annexation and 6,200 acres roughly of land for grandfathered annexations. It's important to remember that those aren't the votes. Those are the opportunity to hear from landowners, gather questions, make sure that staff can follow up on questions, and then turn around in that April meeting and move forward with any vote that the council may or may not want to do. The other thing to remind folks of is that if the annexations are approved of the council, what's happening here is we're actually sending letters out to every impacted property owner, and every single impacted property owner will be sent a copy of the no contest annexation agreement. That's the property tax rebate program that was recently approved by council. And again, to just kind of reiterate how that works, if the annexations are approved by council, all newly annexed property owners will not be on the January 1, 2023 tax rolls. Those are the ones where taxes are due in early 2024. Properties, if they are annexed, will not be assessed any city taxes until the January 1, 2024 tax rolls, and those taxes would be due in early 2025. In addition, council's created, through that ordinance that you passed, a optional program for landowners to be granted the opportunity to apply for a 4-year reimbursement on strictly the city maintenance and operation property taxes. That's on a sliding scale with 100% reimbursement the first and second years those taxes would be due, and then 60% in the third year and 30% reimbursement in the fourth year. So that's a staggered, slow-moving way to get those property taxes in place. Also, you have to remember that according to state law, as I mentioned before, if a property owner has an agricultural exemption from the Kaufman County tax assessor, they're going to have an opportunity to sign an agricultural non-annexation agreement whereby you would delay annexation into a later time. But you have to be, under the state law, designated by the Kaufman County tax assessor as agricultural. So that's an effort. I applaud council for putting that in place, because that's an effort to make opportunity to make the process easier for newly annexed folks by giving them some tax relief to allow them some time to budget for the expense. That also gives us time to, when we annex, to have the opportunity to develop road and transportation plans along with development. And that's really a problem that we face, right? When developments happen in the unannexed area, when develops happens out in the county has no land use control. And as we saw recently with our other annexations and of voluntary areas, we came forward. We had landowners in our ETJ that wanted to build 10,000 new household units. And because we were able to negotiate voluntary annexations on those, or are in the process of doing so, we were able to whittle that down to 5,000 new houses. And we were able to arrange for the roads to get built in a concurrent manner with the development. When you annex, you have the opportunity to do that. The county doesn't have the state law capability to do that. So that's a big key to why move forward to do annexation. Of course, we say this all the time, annexation's not about the current landowner. Annexation's about the future developer who can build with no concerns for the neighbors. Existing citizens and businesses have a clear interest in preventing haphazard growth, promoting consistent land uses, and preparing welcoming entryways. Growth trends and market forces demand the city take a proactive role to protect long-term property values by regulating the establishment of those businesses and high-density uses that could be problematic for a variety of reasons, or maybe they would just simply generate traffic beyond the capacity of the roadway system. And if Kaufman County were not one of the fastest growing counties in the United States, we would not be faced with pursuing these annexations. However, the development's coming, and the city needs to consider this proactive approach. So I would thank council for the opportunity to consider this. I thank council for the opportunity to bring these forward. I think it's an important thing. We all know annexation is not a thing that anybody enjoys doing. It's not something that we look at and say, wow, it's anything other than difficult, because we know it matters very much to the people who get annexed. We're sympathetic to that. We want to listen to that. We want to make sure that we give folks an opportunity to talk to us about it. And then the bottom line is, if you do pass the resolution, letters will start going out very soon, and invite people to the public meetings. Let them know that their specific property is subject of the public hearing, And every single one of them will be invited to have a meeting with Mr. Schumpert, and we'll have his door open for being the front door of, hey, I've got a question, I don't understand the law, I don't understand how this impacts me, or maybe they've got a complaint or an issue that needs to get resolved. Greg will be customer service central on the project overall. So I thank Greg for that. That's going to be a lot of work for Greg, and I'll turn it back over to the mayor for discussion.
So let's clarify, Mr. Sims, there's 1,000 voluntary.
Yes, sir.
And then there's 52 or 62? I've heard two
62.
different numbers.
Pardon me if I said it wrong, 6,200.
6,200. Okay, earlier you had said 5,200, I think, before you read.
Okay, pardon me.
So let's make sure we got that right. I don't want to mislead anybody or give somebody an opportunity to come back and say, hey, we weren't truthful in our statements. So it's 6,200.
Yes, sir.
Now, this one is a discuss and consider item, but, so we need to direct questions before we make a motion to Mr. Sims. If you have something, if it's a discussion that we're going to have, then once we get the motion and we get a second, then we can enter into our discussions. So, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Sims?
Yes, Mr. Sims. I just want some clarification in regards to the hearing. Is the hearing just strictly the grandfathered property, or is both the voluntary and the grandfathered?
We will provide opportunity for those impacted by the voluntary annexations, the one in yellow on the map, or the ones in yellow on the map, and public hearings for the ones identified as purple on the map, the grandfathered ones, so both.
When we're talking about the voluntary annexations, are we dealing with individuals, not the individuals that are volunteering to have the land annexed, but the people that are going to be actually affected by it, by the voluntary?
I guess the right way to describe the voluntary annexation ones is, for example, I'll just use this as an example. There's a fleet of them that in the year 2016, they received a notice that they were subject to an annexation the city was doing in 2016. We provided them a copy of the agricultural agreement that we were using at the time. State law requires us to do that. And we said, look, here is a contract that you can sign to stay out of the city limits, contingent on the idea that at the end, you voluntarily agree to come into the city limits. So we wrote those up in 2016, sent them out to landowners, a small subset of landowners. I think there's 6, but I'm not saying I have that number exactly right off the top of my head. I think there's 6 that came forward and said, hey, we'd like to sign an agricultural non-annexation agreement. They signed it, we've honored that, and there's a provision in it that says after a certain period of time, it converts from a, I'm gonna stay ag and stay out, and it converts automatically into a voluntary petition to come in. So for those public hearings, every single one of them is under a contract that says they request voluntary annexation. Now, under state law process, I still have a public hearing associated with that annexation because it's a public process to be annexed. But it is on their full knowledge that that agreement was signed back in 2016.
But I think it's important to note too, Councilman, that even though the city is not required to do so, it was a contract, as I said, at the end of the time, they voluntarily agree to be annexed. But we're also offering them the opportunity to defer some of their city taxes in the same manner that we are the other folks. We're consistent all the way through. Everybody's being treated the same.
And Mr. Sims, could you just take a few minutes to elaborate on that? This is not a city takeover of land. I mean, this is part of the process.
Yeah, I always have to go back, and a lot of people will go online and say inaccurate things about annexation. And that's just the world we live in. And so a couple of basic things to say about annexation. Annexation just changes where the city limit line is. Annexation is not condemnation. Annexation is just changing the location of the city limit line. Annexation is also not a change of land use. So a lot of people worry about that. We've done many annexations in the past. This is similar in size to things that we did between the year 2010 and current. In all of those annexations, we've always reassured the landowner that when you're annexed, a use that you're doing, you've got horses on your property, you keep horses on your property, You know, you're doing a certain land use, you're running a certain business. If you continuously run that business, then there's no change to your land use status, okay? If you stop running your business, then you can become subject to the new zoning rules. But if you continuously run the business, then you have full rights to keep doing that perpetually, okay? So there are very few state law exceptions to what I just said, but by and large, what you're doing is you're saying, okay, those newly annexed areas, they're simply areas where if someone's living in a house, they got a cow, they've got cattle, they've got whatever it is, they're gonna keep doing the exact same thing after annexation. And the question here is to say, and I'll put it to you this way, this is a large acreage number. Everybody would say, gosh, you know, 1,000 acres of voluntary, 6,200 acres of grandfathered annexations, that's a large land area. Why is it a large land area? Because what we were trying to identify is tracts of land that could easily be developed with a certain amount of density that could be very detrimental to our transportation network, detrimental to our city, and detrimental if they don't have proper police coverage. You've heard me say in a number of times, if you have 300 new people move into an area outside of the city limits, they're not paying for city police forces. Well, what happens? That area tends to be poorly covered by the sheriff's office because the sheriff can't expand everywhere and can't serve everywhere. So whenever we have opportunity to annex a vacant piece of land that might have 300 houses on it in the future, that gives us an opportunity to say, hey, that's where the Terrell Police Department will, whenever the development happens, the Terrell Police Force will be funded by the new residents who are there. And I think that's an important part of this engine as well. We're making sure that it's the Terrell Police Department, the Terrell Fire Department, that are the public safety entities of record in every single piece of land that gets annexed. And I can assure you that having, you know, it doesn't take very long to look around Kaufman County and look around the Metroplex and find places where a community that was built outside the city limits isn't being policed very well, and it's directly adjacent to the city limits, and bad things happen there. That is just not a good model for development overall. So our suggestion as staff is let's take a look at being proactive, annex the land when it's vacant as much as we possibly can, get ahead of the issue as much as we possibly can so that when the development happens, the person building a house knows, okay, that's in the city limits. I'm going to end up supporting the Terrell Police Department with my taxes on that piece of land. And that's a very important part of this process. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
So with this addition of 7,200 acres, the responsibility the city's gonna have is to provide fire and police. Are there any other responsibilities we're gonna have as a city gaining that much
Yes, ma'am,
acreage? What else?
We'll have code enforcement, we would have
Okay.
libraries, we would have, all of the services that people within the existing city limits have would be available, save in some cases, water and sewer, which would still be provided by either a municipal district or by septic in the case of sewer. Everything else would be.
So no water, no sewer, what about streets, maintenance and all that stuff?
Streets
would be
is,
city.
yeah, so the two that I would key in on are the day you annex, that street flips from a county maintenance to city maintenance, and the day we annex, the resident has opportunity to sign up for our trash pickup, and I can assure you, city residents get a beneficial deal on trash pickup. So they're normally not happy when they get annexed about the property taxes, and they normally are very happy with the new cost of the trash pickup as a resident.
Is there statutes and limitations in the law that says, you know, if we annex these people and they're in the city this long, you need to provide this too? Or they can just always be on septic tank or whatever forever?
It would depend on the development in the area, Councilwoman. As long as it's like it is now, there is no limitations period per se. All we would have to point to is if there's similar areas within our city that have a similar density and topography as this area does, then we're not required to provide water and sewer, other than what's already being provided. Most of them already have water, and most all of them already are on septic. We would, I will say this, though, we would be responsible for monitoring the septics under our local regulations.
I'll give you the example of the US 80 corridor. So one of the annexations that we did several years ago was to annex going west. Our city limit line used to be fairly close to Metro Drive, and we annexed a strip along US 80 running out toward where FM 1392 is, and the old racetrack building out there, if you remember where racetrack used to be. So racetrack had voluntarily petitioned for annexation, so we did a strip that ran out in that direction. Well, it's taken us since those annexations to this year where we've started working on a project where a developer in that area, the North Spur development, they're spending $4 million to build a water line to run along that section of US 80. Yeah, so that's a developer paid for $4 million, and that'll be our first opportunity with that particular annexation to start giving folks the opportunity to transition to directly that water. So it becomes a development-driven process. I would anticipate the same thing for some other areas here coming soon, and we'll just always be keeping an eye on opportunities to expand water and sewer services. But those are ones we always describe as being development-based.
I just have one other question about the land use, so that if it's, like you were saying, if it's agricultural now, they can stay agricultural. If they have a certain business there now, they can keep that business. And you said until they stop. Well, I just want to make sure that, I guess, that we have clarity about, because I know that was an issue back in one of the other annexations of, they stopped doing this kind of business and then wanted to do a different type of business. And so that changed the
Yeah, so,
parameters and.
Right, I would absolutely say that's where it gets problematic. So I'll give you, I'll start with the worst-case scenario, okay? So we know that one of the areas that will be subject to the public hearings is a fireworks sales place. So council will have to make a decision, because that's one of the very, very few things that, and it's actually the only one we're aware of in all of these, where we'll have to give some considerations to, well, how long should the fireworks stand be allowed to be there? And last time we had this conversation, there was discussion about 3 years, 5 years, 4 years, 2 years. We'll have that discussion again when we get back over to the public hearings for that one particular business. But it's the only one we're currently aware of that provision of state law exists. Now, let's get back to your more common question, which is, let's say a building gets annexed and somebody is rolling along, operating a current business. 2, 3, 4 years after annexation, they stop operating that business, and it's vacant for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever. Somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to do the exact same thing. Then the entire question revolves around zoning. And if there's zoning on top of that land that has changed what's permissible in that particular area, that's where our landowners have typically run into trouble, because they've allowed a grandfathered use to become a vacated use. And once it's vacated, you no longer can do that. It has to abide by the new zoning rules. And that's what we've got different cases of here and there, where we're trying to work through those issues with different landowners. We try not to be punitive about that, but at some point you have to say, hey, how can we come up with a solution? And those tend to be things that we spend a lot of time trying to work through. And I wouldn't say that we're perfect at that either. I think that that's going to be something we have to continue to work on as we go through the annexation process.
Anything else for Mike? All right, then we'll move on. This is a discuss and consider item related to annexation. I've been advised by council that we probably should do a roll call vote on this. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd recommend that you have the city secretary poll the council at the appropriate time.
Okay. So is there, this is item 10.5. It's resolution number 2062. Is there a motion?
Motion to accept Resolution 2062.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Andrea Reese, District 5, and a second from Grady Simpson, District 2, to approve Resolution 2062, setting a date and time and location for 2 public hearings of proposed annexations of certain property. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, oh, no, you're going to poll.
District 2, Grady Simpson, how do you vote?
Yay.
District 3, Ronnie Velazquez, how do you vote?
Aye.
District 4, Stephanie Holmes Thomas. How do you vote? District 5, Andrea Reese, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mayor Rick Carmona, how do you
Yay. Motion passes. Unanimous consent of those present. Next item on the agenda is to adjourn into executive session in accordance with Section 551 of the Texas Government Code to discuss the following. Section 551.071, consultation with attorney pending and contemplated litigation. Section 551.072, personnel matters. And we are now in executive session. Thank all those for attending. We're going to reconvene into regular session and consider action, if any, on items discussed in executive session. Do we have a motion? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all.